welcome all of you. You know, urbanization is an irreversible process, and cities are growing exponentially. The question is, how will they grow? What will we learn from global practices? What will we learn from the mistakes of others? And what will we learn from the best practices of others? Should urbanization have vertical growth? Is tall building the solution? What are the things that others have done which we should avoid? And what are the things that we should take on? So I would request Professor Antony Wood. He's a professor in the Illinois Institute of Technology, Chicago. And he has done a lot of work on urban habitats, tall buildings, and the relations for each other. And today we are at a juncture when there's so much growth happening in India. We are growing exponentially, and it will be very interesting to hear him speak about the conference that's happening of the CTBUH in February 2010. May I request Professor Antony Wood to kindly address us. Thank you.
Okay, good evening everyone. Many thanks for coming out tonight. It's a pleasure for me to be in Pune. I was in Mumbai 2 days ago, Bangalore yesterday, and today's Pune. We chose those three cities because we think the message of the conference is most relevant to those particular three cities. So I've got a few slides that I brought along to show you. This is one of my favorite graphs. It's the world turned into statistics. And really what this is saying behind the numbers is that there are 200,000 people urbanizing on this planet every day. That means we need a city of almost 1 million every week to cope with the migration of people from the countryside to the city, specifically in countries like China, India, and Brazil. Now, where do those people go? Do they go in the American model, which is a dense downtown core and an ever-expanding suburb, i.e. the horizontal city, or do they go in the future vertical cities, or denser cities? And I think it's generally accepted that the horizontal city, the American model, the suburb, everyone living in a single-family home on a big plot of land, is an unsustainable way forward for the future, because of a number of factors, but the increased infrastructure that is involved with the horizontal city, the commute to work, the energy involved in the commute to work, the pollution that's put into the air, the increased power, sewage, water networks that are required. So denser cities are seen as being a serious part of the way forward. This is another graph which plots energy efficiency, specifically with transport, against urban density. And it reinforces what I've just said. You know, the most energy inefficient cities are those that we see on the top left-hand side, specifically poor Houston in America, which always gets the worst rap, because it doesn't have any mass transit. And then down on the right, we see some of the Asian cities, and specifically Singapore and Hong Kong, where actually to own a car in Hong Kong is punitive. It's counterproductive. It works against you. There are a plethora of mass transit options in Hong Kong. Anything on one wheel or more serves as a form of public transport. I just want to talk about a few trends in tall buildings. You may be aware of some of these trends, but it's worth reinforcing. We've often seen pockets of frenzied tall building activity. If you think Chicago in the 1890s, New York in the 1920s, parts of Asia in the 1990s. What we've seen in the last 15 years has been absolutely unprecedented, which is tall buildings developed in all four corners of the globe on an unprecedented scale, not only in number but also in height. You know, the next world's tallest building, the Burj Dubai, will be over 800 meters in height. That is a jump of over 300 meters on the current world's tallest, Taipei 101. And no building in the history of mankind has ever gone more than 68 meters above another one. So this is a massive jump. And what this graph shows is the height of the 10 tallest buildings constructed each year since 1960. Now this yellow bar here is this year. And that includes the Burj Dubai, because everyone thought it was going to be finished this year. But look what's happening after this year. That's next year. And that doesn't include the Burj Dubai. So what I'm trying to say is, this is not just about the Burj Dubai. Behind the Burj Dubai, there are a multitude of other super tall buildings. Super tall, by the way, we define it as more than 300 meters. Another trend, a change in location. And again, you probably know this already, but I think it's worth looking at it in terms of the graph. The yellow bar there indicates North America, again from 1930 onwards. So what you start to see in the 1990s, and then specifically in the 2000s, is this drastic change in location, to the point where by the end of next year, only 22% of the 100 tallest buildings in the world will be in North America. The light green colour is Asia, and the dark green colour is the Middle East. There are now more tall buildings in Asia than there are in the whole of North America. Taking that one step further into cities themselves, this is the list of 25 tallest cities in the world as we are here today, adding up all tall buildings above 100 meters. Hong Kong at the top, interestingly about 3 times taller than the next city, tallest city, which is New York. The red indicate North America, green is Asia. And in 25th place at the bottom there, 25th place is Mumbai. So although Mumbai is in relative infancy in developing tall buildings, it's already 25th on the list. So you can see where that's going to go. Another trend has been the change in motivation behind these tall buildings. And if you look at the history of the world's tallest building, it's always been about dominance. It's always been about projecting superiority over somebody else or something else. But it's usually been in the corporate realm. If you look at the titles of the world's tallest buildings, they were called things like the Chrysler Building, after the Chrysler Corporation, Sears Tower, Petronas Tower. But now look at the titles of these buildings now since the year 2000 onwards. They're now called Taipei 101, Burj Dubai, Chicago Spire, India Tower. The whole agenda has changed. They're now about projecting the vitality of a city in a competitive world market. Cities are using tall buildings as icons to say, hey, you know, we're a serious player, we want your business. This is not necessarily a good thing either. So that's a few trends in tall buildings. I have a lot of opinions with tall buildings. You know, I'm the executive director of the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, so what I'm about to say may come as a shock. But I actually think that 95% of tall buildings in existence today are pretty crap pieces of design. I think a lot of them don't have the right to even call themselves architecture. They are purely commercial animals that are built for commercial gain. And I think that tall buildings need to evolve beyond where they are now. This is what I call the shortfall of tall. Tall buildings are usually designed in one of two ways. They're either designed for maximum commercial floor space, and this is a seminal piece of architecture. Mies van der Rohe's Seagram Tower in 1958 marks the pinnacle of high-rise architecture. In a way, it also marks the decline of high-rise architecture, because this model was so successful, it was hijacked and superimposed in 10,000 places around the world, because it was a successful commercial model. By the way, this is where we started to go wrong, because this marked the point that architecture became liberated, in inverted commas, from place, from culture, from climate, from anything that the last 4,000 years of vernacular architecture had taught us. And the second approach is the sculptural iconic approach. And a tall building is designed pretty much as you design any piece of sculpture. And although it results in more interesting form, I don't think that these buildings do anything more to actually relate to place. The only relationship between the building and place is a visual one. It's a, I am beautiful, behold me. And whilst it remains at that level, the building can be picked up and transplanted anywhere around the world, and that really troubles me. You know, I've lived in 8 countries and travelled across all 7 continents. And the reason I've done that is because I'm interested in the differences between places, not the similarities. And I think architecture is homogenising cities around the world, and I think tall buildings are the worst culprits. And you see these competitions, you know, for a skyscraper in Moscow, and you'll see the unsuccessful design entries pop up for a competition in Mumbai or Melbourne or New York, somewhere else. And you know, I think we should be doing better than this. And I think it's important that tall buildings relate to place, and I think it's important that local architects, developers and engineers, you know, here in India, for example, look for an Indian response for the skyscraper and stop building all glass air-conditioned towers which are completely divorced from culture and climate. So as a professor, this is what I've been doing for the past 8 years with my students, looking into more appropriate design responses. Sorry, this is what it translates to into many cities in Asia. On the left, Jakarta, a city where I used to work. On the right, Seoul. Just air-conditioned boxes. And this is some of the work that I've been doing with my students over the last 8 years or so. Earlier this year, we came and did a project in Mumbai, working with the Remaking of Mumbai Federation, where we designed 5 towers in the seawall. And there's a lot behind this project. I'm going to be talking about it at the conference, but the one thing I want to put across is that what we tried to do here was bring the city into the sky. And for me, it's completely nonsensical as we make a push for ever taller, ever denser cities, that we leave all the city at the ground floor. And I believe that that needs to come up into the buildings. And when I say the city, I mean the sidewalks, I mean the parks, I mean the functions, the public zones. And I know it's a utopian vision, but it has been done in many places around the world. So we feel that tall buildings have an opportunity to really contribute to this, to the very real challenges of climate change and the need for more sustainable patterns of life. For 2 reasons, really. One, the bigger picture. And by the way, if anyone ever tells you that a tall building is a sustainable form in itself, they're talking bullshit. Because the embodied energy in tall buildings and the operating energy is going to be greater than a smaller building. No matter how much you reduce that, it's probably going to be higher. It's the bigger picture items that makes tall buildings and denser cities more sustainable, i.e. the concentration on a smaller footprint of land and the loss and the reduced infrastructure costs. But this is the other scenario. I love this slide because it's a testing rig, massive testing rig, for this little structural, not so little, but this one structural detail here, which I think was from the Swiss Re Tower in London. And what that shows is that the professional and economic investment in a tall building can allow this to be done. This would never be done on a 4-story building, far too expensive. But because this one structural connection is going to be repeated 500 or 5,000 times in the building, the investment in it is so great. And so we can use tall buildings to test things. We can use tall buildings to test for the harnessing of wind energy or solar energy or rainwater harvesting and all these experimental type technologies, which at the minute, and again, if anyone tells you otherwise, I think they're talking rubbish. Nobody actually knows if these things work or not. Nobody actually knows if harnessing wind at the top of a tall building is a sensible option, or if it's better to actually collect all this up and put it in offshore wind farms. There's arguments on both sides. But what I think is that we should certainly be supporting the projects that are investing millions and billions of dollars, or rupees, to try and achieve, or at least experiment to find out whether they are a good solution or not. Very quickly, I want to tell you a bit about my organisation. It's the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat. We are celebrating our 40th year. We were set up in 1969 by the engineers and architects that were designing Sears and Hancock. And really, the reason they set up the council is because they were doing the architectural equivalent of flying to the moon. It had never been done before. And they wanted to disseminate that information out around the world for the greater learning of everybody. And 40 years later, that's still what we're doing. We exist to disseminate best practice information. We're also as most not-for-profit associations, a big networking club. So we have most of the architects, engineers, developers, contractors, suppliers around the world that are involved in tall buildings, because they know that they're, a few times a year at our conferences and other forums, going to be put in the same room with the world leaders that are making this happen for business networking. We've got almost 400,000 people within our organisational network, spread across 4,000 offices. And there's just a list of some of the people who support us at the highest level. I'm sure you know several of these companies. Now we're organising a conference here, February 3rd to the 5th, 2010. It's going to be a great 3-day conference, but actually that's not really what we're doing. Or we are, but we want to use that for the establishment of a chapter of the council here in India. Because what we see is this great energy and this great vitality to do something with the cities here because of the urbanisation, because of an unbelievable 7.9% economic growth. If you're not aware, by the way, the rest of the world other than India, China are in the middle of a major recession. And so, we believe that we can help by giving access to information and networking with people that have made a lot of the mistakes around the world and gone through a lot of these processes. So that's what we want to do on the back of this conference, is establish an India chapter. I'll come back to that. Very quickly, what do? Well, we produce books. You may be familiar with these books. We produce a journal 4 times a year, which has the cutting-edge, latest research papers in on all aspects of tall buildings. We're multidisciplinary, of course. You can go on our website now and get access to perhaps 1,000 papers on all different aspects of tall buildings. Seismic design, wind harnessing. We have working groups, committees, that get together and report around a subject. So this was our last report that we produced last year, recommendations for the seismic design of high-rise buildings. We're the body that arbitrates on tall building height, so we say who the world's tallest building is, or the city's tallest building, or a country's tallest building. So we have thousands of buildings in our database. Again, these are online, free for your use. This is shows buildings under construction as well as those projected, those topped out and those built. We give awards out each year. These were the award winners this year. Global news on our website updated each day, what's going on around the world in tall buildings and urban habitat. And then we organise conferences. We've been organising conferences for 40 years. One thing I do want to say is there are a lot of conferences around the world now. There are 2 types of organisations that are organising conferences. Those who do it to make money and those who do it to disseminate information. And by the way, if we can do it to disseminate information and make a little bit of money, that helps because we're a not-for-profit, but that's not why we do it. So very briefly, the conference that's coming up, Remaking Sustainable Cities, the Remaking of Sustainable Cities in the Vertical Age. You'll notice there's not the word tall building in the title. In the vertical age makes reference to the age that we live in now, i.e. going taller and denser cities. But this is not necessarily a conference about tall buildings. It's a conference about creating more sustainable patterns of life. That statistic I gave about a city of 1 million people needed every week, of course that's not really happening because people are flocking to existing cities and putting strain on existing cities. So how can we remake those cities? And I think the best example that we have close to here is Mumbai, and the way that the population has grown to 16 million and the massive problems that that city faces. So how can they cope with those problems whilst trying to remake more sustainable patterns of life? So we have a number of speakers, both local and international experts coming in to give their viewpoints, to start the debate. This is not just a sit in the audience and soak it all up, it's the start of the debate. Part of the agenda with the program, with the conference, is to get political leaders there. I've been here 5 days and I'm hearing 2 things. I've perhaps had 300 conversations in the past 5 days and I'm consistently hearing 2 things: governance and infrastructure. The other day we had a networking roundtable with the Times of India, and I went so far to say, you should stop building tall buildings for a while because the infrastructure has to catch up. The governance needs to be put in place to allow the infrastructure to happen, the investment in infrastructure, and then the infrastructure needs to happen quickly as possible. So that's what the conference is about. So we're going to have a number of case studies of cities that are remaking themselves, and also some of these case studies of new cities, because they have some interesting aspects to their planning and sustainability terms. So we're going to be hearing from someone at Norman Foster's in London, talking about Masdar City in Abu Dhabi, touted as a carbon neutral city. Though whether you can actually create a carbon neutral city in the middle of the desert where you don't have a rapidly urbanizing population is another question. But that's part of the debate at the conference. Arab, who are going to be talking about Dongtan Eco-City in China. Stan Gale, head of a big American developer company, Gale International, talking about Songdo City in South Korea. And then, you know, similar, what's happening here in India. So this is the political aspect again. Mr. Gaikwad, the Metropolitan Commissioner in Mumbai, is going to be talking about the plans in Mumbai and this 101-story Wadala Tower. He was at our launch party in Mumbai a couple of nights ago. Mr. Mehta talking about the plans for Dharavi. Oh, you can pronounce that better than I can. We're going to have the chairman of Lavasa talking about that development, which is not far from here. And then projects like the Gift City up in Gujarat. And the conference is set into different themes for each day. So day one is going to be about this whole urban scale. The global case studies, international case studies. Day two is going to be focused on India. India, Mumbai, Pune, cities like that. Day three is going to be focused on the latest advances in tall buildings. And we're going to have a lot of renowned architects and engineers from around the world to come and speak to us. So Ken Yang, who's been doing for 30 years what many are now talking about, i.e. actually designing and building eco-skyscrapers. Not all what they're cracked up to be, but at least exploring some of the themes that I think are essential for us carrying forward. Charles Correa, talking about his work and specific aspects of high-rise and high-density in India. To be confirmed, because he has his hands full at the minute, but His Excellency Muhammad Ali Alabar in Dubai, who spoke at our conference in Chicago a month ago, excuse me, to come and talk about the Burj Dubai. You know, what are the motivations behind building an 800-meter tall tower? I would imagine it would be very different behind a lot of the towers that are being built here, where there is this urbanistic need. Now this one's interesting. This is the world's tallest building as we sit here. I stand here today. Taipei 101. It's 508 meters. It was finished late 2004, which is just 5 years ago. And it just 3 weeks ago announced plans for a complete environmental upgrade of the building. Billions and billions, millions and millions of dollars to upgrade the environmental aspects, new MEP systems, new whatever. We're going to have Kathy Yang from Taipei 101, who's number 2 within the Taipei Financial Organization, come and talk to us about these plans. But if that doesn't show the rapid pace of sustainability and technologies, that the world's tallest building, just 5 years old, is going to be completely upgraded, then I don't know what does. Other iconic towers are also going to be spoken about on this third day. Shyam Sundar, who's the director of the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, he was the lead investigator on the World Trade Center disaster, talking to us about the US agenda for net zero energy high performance buildings. And then one that I'm particularly looking forward to, you may not know Alain Robert unless I told you he was the French Spider-Man. He's this crazy guy who goes all around the world climbing all these tall buildings without ropes. You may have seen him. And we've not invited him because, well, I'm not particularly interested about how he does the climbing bit, but when he climbs these buildings, two things happen. You get the security guards and the police at the top of the tower looking down, waiting to put him in prison when he gets up there, and you get hundreds of people at the base of the tower cheering him on. And for me, this kind of epitomizes tall buildings. Tall buildings are elitist structures that take so much from the city and yet give nothing back. You know, who the hell do these buildings belong to? Who should they belong to? And I think Alan Robert really touches on that. You know, he's like a Robin Hood in a way. Excuse me. The public are in support of him and the authorities are not. And I think it's just an interesting social implication. You know, the Swiss Re Tower in London absolutely annoys me that there is a fantastic restaurant at the top of this, you know, the Gherkin, with this brilliant glazed dome, and you can't get a table there for love nor money unless you're connected. Our last conference, our conference last year was in Dubai. It was actually our 8th World Congress. We had 954 delegates from 43 countries, representing 430 companies at that conference. It was incredibly successful. And we had a conference last month, about a month ago in Chicago, which drew 615 delegates from 35 countries, which in the height of a major world recession we was astounded at. We believe we're going to get more than 1,000 people at the Mumbai Conference, because there is clearly such an energy and excitement here, and this desire to learn more, network more, and really try and progress Indian cities in the best way possible. At this stage, I'm going to let Mayank come up and talk to you a little bit about the rates for the conference. But one thing I did want to just emphasize, as I said, this conference is about starting something or helping to start something in India for the benefit of everybody. And it's not just a 3-day event, it's the India chapter, and we also want Indian companies to become part of our network and get involved in the initiative, speak at our conferences, join our working groups. I was talking with a curtain wall company the other day who are now going to get on board and start a new working group on curtain walls. One thing I did want to say, our individual membership, we want organizations to get involved as well, but individual membership is $150, and if you're a member, you get a $200 discount off the conference. So there's an added incentive to join the council, and we really want people and organizations to join the council. So having said that, I'm going to let Mayank tell you a little bit more about costs, and then I'm going to answer any questions, or attempt to answer any questions there are from the audience. So I'll just pass over to Mayank.
We would like. I hope that was for Antony and not for me coming and speaking. Okay, the membership, the delegate charges for the early bird, which ended in 15th November, was 30,000 rupees for non-members, and if you are a member, then you pay 20,000. So if the membership is in effect $150, about 7,500 rupees. So if you become a member and you get all the benefits of CTBUH membership, and then you still pay 10,000 less. So this was the early bird on the 15th November. What is right now is the 31st December 2009. But when we had a cocktail dinner, a similar kind of an event, to much larger attendance, in Mumbai a couple of days back, somebody asked that we have just come to know about it, and we would like if you would give us the same advantage of the early bird, which we have agreed. So I come with an offer that if you become a delegate, either as a non-member at 30,000 or as a member by paying 20,000 and the $150, then we can give it to you if you make the payment within 7 days. I would like you to register. In that packet that you have got, there is a registration form, and if you take that registration form and give it to our people who are sitting there, and then you can make the payment in the next 7 to 10 days. So I would like you to take advantage of this offer. Come and join this landmark event that of a scale that has never happened before in India, and learn, network, and get so much out of it. And I would request, if anybody has any questions to Professor Wood, we'll be very happy to answer that.
Last night in Bangalore, some people asked me some really tough questions, and we had a pretty good debate going, so please don't hold back if you've got some tough questions. or something that you really want to ask. Have we got a microphone in the audience? Are there any questions? All right, I'm going to start off with a question, and for you guys. And this, I suspect, is relevant to Pune, but at a different scale. Why didn't Mumbai make the decisions on critical decisions on infrastructure 40 years ago, like cities like Singapore and Hong Kong did? Can anyone answer that for me? When it had a population of, I don't know, 6 or 8 million, and only 20% were living in slums as opposed to 55%? Because every day that's lost in making these critical decisions, the job gets even more difficult. I spent several days in the city. I'm amazed to know why that is. An answer there.
I think the only answer is politics.
Politics. That's, yeah, I've heard that this week. I mean, by the way, every successful city that I've been to in the world has a non-car-based mass transit system. You know, you may say that Los Angeles is a successful city, but everybody travels by car. The real successful cities are dense and have mass transit systems. So to me, when I was part of this roundtable discussion the other day with the Times of India, I made the controversial statement that I think Mumbai needs to stop trying to solve its problems in a piecemeal way, because what I'm seeing is solutions that are put in place that don't really get to the root of the problem, like widening roads or something like that. I think it needs to move to a non-car-based mass transit system as soon as possible. Start to implement that. And I know there's been a lot of plans, but I'm not seeing anything actually happening on the ground yet. Anyway, that was just to get things going. Has anyone got any questions?
Actually, I'm endorsing some part of what you said. The point was, Mumbai has a different set of problems in the sense that it has a continuous influx of people coming to the city. Now, when people come with an idea of earning your livelihood in the city, that's the first part of the job for the politicians or the leaders at the helm, to stop somewhere. And as you rightly said, once you stop somewhere, you have to put in an action plan to see that the whole system is looked at, not fits and jerks of just widening certain roads, building certain skyscrapers, building certain bridges of the kind you have on the screen there. It would need a complete look at the problem. So you'd have to stop people coming in, looking at the problem, but that would never happen with the kind of political system we have. The more people that come in, the more voter bank that is evolved, and the more, so it's a catch-22 situation, I would say.
Second thing, why politically these cities don't work? I think the real cause lies that the city doesn't belong to anyone. The political system in India, with the state at the helm of the affairs, Mumbai doesn't belong to. It is ruled by the state of Maharashtra with the MLAs representing. There is not a single person who is at the helm of the city as a mayor. Unlike in most of the cities in the world where mayor is responsible to take the decision and the mayor is directly elected by the people. So when a mayor is elected, he is the person who is answerable also directly. And that's where the flaw is. If you look at Enrique Peñalosa, if you look at Lamy Mayor, all these people who brought in these transportation systems in the city of Curitiba and all these, this is where the mayor has been at the helm of the affairs. So until and unless we completely change the system where mayor is in command, the city is in the command of a person, this decision will never be taken, because politically the people who are representing the state are in the interest of their own constituencies, which is not Bombay at all. So it is a complete different network of a political system. And this needs to change, and this has been talked about. Architect Charles Correa has been talking about, everyone has been talking about, but nothing has happened so far as far as the country is concerned.
Mayank wants to respond to that, and I mean, I agree with this, the second bit. I just want to come back to the first bit. I do disagree with you in terms of scale. You know which is the world's largest urban agglomeration? It's not Mumbai, it's not Rio de Janeiro, it's Seoul Incheon in South Korea. Urban agglomeration, i.e. largest continual urban not necessarily metropolitan city, but largest urban plain, if you like. It's Seoul, Incheon. And those are successful high-rise cities. The scale of the problem in some of the Indian cities is massive, I know that. But I don't think you can say 16 million people, impossible to solve. It just would have been much easier before the pressures were on the city, but I genuinely believe it's got to be solved, and the quicker that the systems can be put in place, political, governance, planning or otherwise, you know, the less difficult the job's going to be. Maya.
You pointed out the subject which I am very passionate about. It is the complete lack of governance which is the problem for our urban chaos as there is the rural chaos. But it just does not stop at an elected mayor. If I go on the express highway or I go on the Mumbai Western Express Highway, that road belongs to PWD. When I climb the bridge, it is an MMRD bridge. When I turn right, it's a BMC road. And as I go ahead, it's the Central Government Railways and Airport Authority. The multiplicity of authorities, the fact that local people are never heard, there is no engagement with the local people. And I was with a top bureaucrat a week back, and I said, all over the world you have these guys. I mean, there is not Bill Clinton, when he was the most powerful man in the world, when he had to do some changes to his building, he had to take the permission from the local borough. When I told him, why don't you take the stakeholders? He dismissed it. How do these idiots and panwalas ever know what the city looks like? And trust me, if you go to that panwala, you will have far better ideas about how his locality and area should be than the bureaucrats sitting in Mantralaya. So what you are saying is just one of the problems in a major governance failure. And that will have to begin by bringing the people together, removing the multiplicity, having an empowered and a directly elected. Directly elected is a process. But what I am saying is an empowered and accountable CEO of the city, whether he's a mayor or is appointed by the chief minister. And just to end that, the Mumbai votes for its councillors or corporators to run the city of Mumbai. But the city of Mumbai is run by a municipal commissioner who is not accountable. He can be shifted the next minute, who is appointed by a chief minister from Nanded, and the people who are voted to run the city of Mumbai have no say into that. It's a ridiculous state of affair and it needs to change. I'm sorry, I just went away from the subject.
And lately we've been designing one project which is 600 meters long building with FSI-5. And in this course of event, we had international bidding which went on, and there are 4 different companies all over the world who bidded for this project, and we had a presentation last week in Bangkok. And we chose to work with a company called MVRDB. Excellent work. I think it's something what you're talking about, vertical housing and integrating at multiple levels. This project will be launched on 26 Jan 2010. And I think this would create something what you've been talking about, and it will be a good example to see in Pune in coming times.
Do you need high amount of population concentrated at one place, or it will be more sustainable to have number of smaller urban agglomeration spread at certain distance?
Well, that's a good question, and sat on the row behind you is Scott Wrighton from Lavasa City, and I was debating this with him the other night, and the whole rationale behind their development is to take pressure away from the city by developing, urban centres outside the city. And I've got my own views, and I've actually got my own strong views, and I don't mean about Lavasa, I mean about your question, and I think that density is vital. Really, I think it's the driver for everything. By the way, it requires us all to completely change our whole pattern of life. The single family house and all the rest of it. And not wishing to sound too sour a no, I don't think we'll do it until we're absolutely forced to. When climate change becomes a matter of survival rather than a matter of change, then we'll start to see the change. Now it's just hurting, a fraction of what it is going to hurt. To get back to your point, I don't know the answer. I know my own opinions. I don't know the answer. But in that, I think, lies the problem. The problem with sustainability is twofold. One, the complete amount of bullshit that's involved. Sustainability hasn't even been defined. And yet you've got these experts that pop up in every street corner saying they have the answer. There's too much bullshit involved in sustainability, and no one knows the answer. And what I was saying about the wind farms, is it better to put them in buildings? Yes, wind speed increases in height, and power out is directly proportional to speed in. And higher up in the city, there's not the blocking of wind that you see lower down. And it's then being supplied at the point where it's needed. But then what about the impact on the city and all the rest of it? And then you've got the other camp who say, well, no, it's much better to have all these massive wind turbine off, in the sea offshore. But then the counter argument is, and then you've got to pipe the energy back into the city. You cannot win. I mean, just bear with me a sec. But one thing that that amazes me, it's when you go to the bathroom and you've done your business, and then you go and wash your hands, and you dry your hands. What's the most sustainable way of drying your hands? There are 3 types of ways of drying your hands that I know of. One, an electric machine that takes energy, that you press a button and put your hands under, and you think, bad, bad, bad. Energy, it's using energy just to dry your hands. Paper towels, which you use 3 of and throw away in the bin, bits of trees that you're throwing away just to wipe your hands. And then you would think to yourself, so the towels, the rolling towels, you dry your hand on the towels, that's got to be the most sustainable way. And then you think, yeah, but hang on, then those towels need to be taken away, they need to be laundered, taken away in a van, laundered with detergent. Where does the detergent go? Energy in the towels, energy in the detergent, blah, blah. And I don't have an answer to it, but what I'm saying is, there's so much involved in this, so much connected. Be very suspicious of anyone who tells you they know the answer. In 100 years from now, if we're all still here, not us, but then we'll be able to look back and say, wow, that was a really experimental period. And in hindsight, it was silly to do that or to do this. But that's the period we're in. We're in this experimental period. And I think it would be a lot better if we just acknowledge that and stop, pretending that we have all the answers. We've got to do the testing to find out what's right. Final question here, perhaps, and then maybe we should have drink and dinner. But there's a question just here on the road.
As you mentioned, about 40 years ago, Bombay had 66 million as the population. Now it has grown to 16 million. After all that population gathers in that city, you tend to raise the FSI and cater to the needs of all those people. Instead, as Pushkar was saying some time back, the sustainability would actually mean that you restrict growth of a city in particular areas to a certain extent, and then probably look for another location for development of the cities. Increasing FSI will actually mean nothing else but going high-rise and not being sustainable at all.
Okay, this is going to be embarrassing. I've heard it all week, and I don't know what FSI is. I'm sorry, can you explain? When you say FSI? Oh, FAR, okay, right. So you mean, in terms of planning, if the restrictions are eased and FAR is allowed to increase? Is that what you're right? Yeah. I think at the heart of... I think the problem with decentralization, which is what you started off with, decentralization has definitely got some merit to it in terms of residential. If you look at Hong Kong, a lot of people live out in the new territories, in new towns. But you can't, I don't think you can actually, it denies the reality of humanity to say we're going to stop immigration into this city and you know, kind of create new cities, completely new cities to take some of the pressure off. Because people flock to these cities because they're successful. So to do that, you've got to build up the other cities and kind of make this city less successful, less attractive. And no one's gonna buy into that. You know, the cities are not going to do them themselves. So I think it depends on what scale you're talking. If you're talking about an urban plan for a particular city where you have strong high-rise nodes within that city as opposed to a blanket tall buildings everywhere, then I would certainly agree with it. But if you're talking about on an urban scale where it's like, okay, no, Mumbai, we've had enough. We won't take any more people. We will develop a new city out 100 kilometers outside it. And I think that just denies the reality of the social situation. But the planning, the tall building planning is exactly what we're saying. That's the essential thing. And another example I've used of that this week, if you build a high-rise office tower in the centre of London, in the city of London, 60 stories, 4,000 people. Do you know how many car parks it'll have? 10. 10 car parks for disabled access or something like that. It will not be allowed to have more than 10 because the building would have only been allowed to exist, to be developed on that site because it was close to the infrastructure to support it, i.e. the mass transit nodes, the water, the power and all the rest of it. So this is what we're talking about. You know, the decision on tall buildings shouldn't be left to where does a company think they can make a financial return so that they invest in that site. It needs to be part of a joined up plan. A joined up plan like you're talking about, which is maybe high-rise nodes within a city, but also a local plan in terms of infrastructure, mass transit and those things. So I don't know if I fully answered your question there, but I gave it my best shot. Are there any other questions or points? Okay, I want to draw it to a close now because I think dinner's waiting and there's drinks back there. I'm gonna be here until the last person leaves. If you want to come and talk to me individually about any of this, but one thing I want to finish by really encouraging you to join this conference.
अरे बोल क्या बोलते हैं